is maybe a little bit of wisdom. My family has been in America 117 years. I'm not a person who has, I'm not first generation. And I think sometimes when you've been part and parcel of the country itself, maybe the frames of reference are a little bit different. And I often hear moms and dads asking me about raising children and how do you raise children and aren't you afraid of losing your faith in America and so on and so forth. And I say, no, completely the opposite. I find that it's so very easy in America to embrace faith and to be who you are and to not have to apologize for who you are, even in a post 9/11 environment. We should not be apologizing for loving God or for having God be a part of our daily existence. So when I think about women and the role of women in family, because the audience is varied today, I want to be able to speak about the role of women, but really from the womb. And then sort of her growth and development into her teens for just a few moments. And then from there, her role as mother and spouse. And so for those of you who are single moms, there are messages in here for you who don't have the support of a spouse. For those of you who are fathers who may have daughters, there's a message in here for you. For those of us who are husband and wife and have daughters and granddaughters, there should be a message in here for us. And then, of course, the relationship between the husband and wife. So I hope that I can touch on something that is meaningful to all of you and not just the spousal relationship. So let's think about her and how significant she is, why perhaps God Almighty, in his great wisdom, gave her the womb, how it is that when he creates something, he creates it fully, and he creates it with the capacity and the capability to fulfill its mission. God is not short-sighted when he designs at all. So when God created the she, he gave the she the faculties within which to be able to carry this child in her womb, and gave her a heart that has a very special compassion when it's in sync with God, and has allowed her these multiple roles. We cannot underestimate that when a child is born, the environment into which the child is born. We cannot just say that everyone is on the same trajectory. Some people are born in countries where the role of women is very different than it may be here. People are born with all kinds of multiple factors that influence and shape and give design to the way this child is going to grow. Economic factors, gender issues, political issues, issues of war, issues of violence, issues of all kinds of things. So not every child and every girl is born into this wonderful, wonderful family where she grows up to feel and be the queen in her household. I wish that were true for all women. Sadly, it's not. So when we think about her growing up, and this is very, very critical, and I'm going to echo what Sayyid Mustafa said. For brothers who are looking for a spouse, for sisters who are looking for a spouse, do not underestimate the seed of the fruit that you're thinking you're taking into your life. Who raised her? Who is her father? What kind of a man is he? Who is her mom? What kind of woman is she? Who are the grandparents? What kind of people are they? Who are her siblings? What kind of people are they? Do not underestimate the environment she grew up in for God knows how many years before she becomes wife. 18, 20, 25, 30. What were the early influences? And who were the early influencers? It's very key, because she's going to bring that into the marriage and into the family life. So before she is wife, she is daughter, she is niece, she is sibling, sister, she is granddaughter. She can have so many multiple roles, all of which may be nourished and nurtured differently. And we're going to fast track now. And now she's in her teens. And in her teens, she becomes very self-aware. She starts to ask who she is. And we begin to then see a child who's making choices, starting to decide what's right from wrong, what's good from evil, what's just from unjust, what's arrogant from humility. All types of these decisions that come into her life. And into a boy's life as well, of course, it's the same thing. So when I'm talking she, I also mean he. And then how do they make those choices? And at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, when these are key decisions, if things have not been honed to make the right decision, you all know it's very easy to make the wrong decision. So I believe that when we're raising these girls, it's very key to love them and to respect them. And I'm going to say something that may sound like the wrong word, but I want you to hear it the right way. In a controlled environment. I don't mean an oppressive environment, and I don't mean a restrictive environment. I mean a controlled environment, which means that all of the elements, all of the vaccinations that are coming in to raise these children are vaccinations that help them to make the right decision. First and foremost, the love of God, not the fear of God. The love of God. Because by the time they're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, when they're in this what could be very turmoil type of decision making, if God is not in the equation, if God is not the one that you can lean on, then the variables that can come into that environment are uncontrolled variables. And so, not that we're running a test lab, but that we're giving the right tools to this individual to grow with love and respect. We often come from a point of fear of God, not love of God, in shame and guilt. And I often say, what's not haram, which means forbidden, if it's not haram, then it's aib, which is shameful. We have these two variables. But what about what's good in the language? And what about giving her a sense of herself so that she can make good decisions? And I'm also here to say, while it may not be very popular to say in today's age, I do believe that girls get a sense of themselves through the men in their lives, through their fathers who love them, through their brothers who love them, through their uncles who may love them, people who make them feel self-worth, so that when they're going into a marriage, they're looking for a man who resembles the self-worth that they grew with. And it's very interesting, because girls who do not have a sense of self-worth will look for a spouse that resembles that which they know, bad or good. So now let's move that trajectory just a little bit forward. And now not only is she daughter and sibling and niece and in the community and maybe professional, but now she's going to take on the role of spouse. And what is she bringing into that marriage? Who is she? Najah asked the question about why, that we shouldn't ask why, and I agree. The question is who and how. How is she? And who is she? Then a decision should be made as to whether or not this should be the mother of your family, if this is the right and appropriate girl. And she should be asking the same thing of a man who's going to be entering her life. Who is he? And how is he? And is that the right person to be the father of your children? If we move just a little bit more forward in the dynamics of the marriage, and I'm not going to so much speak about that, she then becomes the womb that's going to give birth to this next generation. And why this is so important to me I really feel strongly about the individual and the collective. True, God has created us, and to God we will return, but God has not created us strictly as independent beings. No, He has created us with an individual responsibility and with the collective responsibility. There's no greater responsibility than your children. And so if she is not well developed, then those variables we were talking about, they can penetrate the environment of the children. Now, if the spouse is very stable and the mom is not so stable, we have a 50-50% chance or better. But if the spouses are not stable, both, then that child or that wife or whomever is going to grow and look in these other dimensions for what Nadia spoke about earlier, for some way to fulfill this whatever is missing. I'm saying we can't allow for much to be missing. But even when things are, if God was at the core in the center, there's still the ability and reliance on a higher power that a girl can come back to. When that's missing, she is in extremely dangerous waters. So I find that it's really critical and important before she becomes mom that she has a sense of self. Actually, I feel she has a sense of God first and foremost, then a sense of self. And then from that sense of self, she's able to share herself and her world with her siblings, with her parents, with her community, with her spouse, and now with her children. Now let's talk about her as mom. It's such a heavy role. It's really big. No matter how much help a woman has, her role is still really pretty heavy. Sometimes she's chairman of the board, meaning her kids, right? The kitchen table, where a lot of decisions are made, where a lot of conversations happen. She's chairman of the board. Sometimes even when her spouse is there, she's still chairman of the board, because sometimes it's just the role she has to take on. And if her husband is gone, or her husband is deceased, or her husband is chronically ill, or any of those things, it's a big role to play. And sometimes she's CEO, Chief Executive Officer. Sometimes she's Sergeant at Arms, having to put the discipline where it needs to be. I don't believe in spanking. I don't even really believe in yelling. Because if you raise your children the right way, the sense of self, the sense of God, the sense of calm, the sense of confidence, it doesn't require yelling and screaming. It requires conversation. And sometimes your nonverbal is way more powerful than your verbal. So kids know when they're out of sync with you. And because the nature is to not be out of sync, its nature is to be in sync, not out of sync. So kids know right away. She's the cook very often, not that he can't cook, but let's face it, he can cook. I taught my boys to cook. She's the taxi cab driver. She's her own profession, maybe, perhaps. And so you put all of these things together, that requires a lot of balance. And that requires a person who has a lot of ability to multitask and to manage multiple roles. And those roles can go on and on and on and on and on. From taking out the garbage, to cutting the grass, to snow blowing, to God only knows, fixing something in the house. And not all women have a spouse that's supportive. And we're talking about women here in the United States, but what about women who, by war and by other things, have been left alone with multiple children? Those are the women that I take care of. Women who are abandoned, abused, divorced, widowed. And they are managing all on their own. Uneducated, poverty-stricken, grief-stricken, post-traumatic stress syndrome, all kinds of horrific things, and they are resilient women. And they are managing their families, sometimes better than the most educated woman that I know of here. And honestly, I am so proud of these women. Do you know what the common factor is? Would you like to guess? It's the God factor. Somehow they've lost so much that they've looked up, not across. And so it brings me back to my point. I really, truly believe that when God is in the equation at an early age, even in the womb, the love of God, not the fear of God, then the conflict transformation that we spoke about earlier, it's able to happen because there's a higher power that you're attaching yourself to. And it's very arrogant of us to think that that equation does not work. So, having said all of that, I believe that her role is really in many ways to be the glue. Now here's the problem. The problem is when she's unglued. And when mom is unglued, it's very difficult. Now, when dad is unglued, it's also very difficult. But I think when mom is unglued, the family as it is at even higher risk. This is just my personal opinion. This is not based on data. It's not based on anything. It's just based on life experience, dealing with multiple families all of the time, with families consistently who coming and looking for help and so on and so forth. And when you see that they're unglued, he or she, and you really try to tease away what is at the core, you rip away all of the layers. At the core is a person who does not really love themselves. And at the core is a person who's not learned the love of God. Because when one learns the love of God and appreciates this God, you almost develop a sense of always being loved and never being alone. And so when you take that factor away, we are really putting our families at risk. Now, I'm all for one who would say it's important to keep the family together until someone is unglued. And that unglued person needs to go fix themselves up before they cause any more harm or danger to their children or their family. Now, it could be that they need help. Could be that they need meds. It could be that they need therapy. It could be a whole list of things. But one thing I do know for sure is that those kids are at risk if they're taking their identity from people who are not stable. And that has to be mitigated. We have to minimize the risk to the kids. And so sometimes the best answer is separation. And sometimes the best answer is a divorce. And sometimes the best answer is to really take that entire family and work on them individually and collectively. I don't know. I really don't know. But I do know that those factors, those variables that are coming into that child's life, they stay with you. And they stay with you for a long time. So there's a decision to be made about who is she going to get her sense of self from. If not from her home, if not from her parents, if not from her kitchen table, if not from these variables, her siblings, then she's going to get them from unknown variables. I really believe that that's why the divorce rate is as high as it is in America. Because I think the disintegration of the values of family structure are at high risk. So I think that there's a lot to do in this issue. I think that it's a very, very significant topic. I think we really have to talk about it. And I think we really have to look more deeply into these layers and what's the cause of stress. But again, you know, Stephen Covey, I'm a Stephen Covey person, Stephen Covey trained. I just love Stephen Covey, Mormon. He teaches begin with the end in mind. So when we're raising our daughters, we have to think about them when they're on their return to God. Not just in this world. What kind of a package are you going to deliver back to God that He's entrusted you with? What will it look like? What skills and skill set and tools and tool set did you give that girl? Because in the end, humanity lives in her, and she's the lifeline. And I'm not one, even though I'm a nurse, who believes in cutting the cord. I believe in the physical cut of the cord, but I don't believe in ever really cutting the cord. There is no such thing. None. It's a cycle. You take care of her, she takes care of you. That's the way it is. So I'm going to just stop right here. And I hope that we can reflect a little bit more deeply on some of these issues. And I thank you for the time. And remember those vaccinations that you give her. Please do that. With love of God, with prayer, with fasting, with all of the tools that we have as way we live our deen. Think about those vaccinations and really remember how they can influence who she is. So the fathers in the room, I'm going to tell you something. Love your daughters, make them feel beautiful, and give them a sense of who they are. Of course, I would say the same thing to the moms. But I have a very strong sense that when a girl grows up and her father's always telling her how wonderful she is, that's the first interaction cross-gender that there is, and how beautiful she is, and how good she is, and how much God loves her, if he's in her life. And if he's not in her life, somebody else needs to be doing that. Mom, too, I don't mean that it's just falling on dads, but that sense of who she is, that first cross-gender, it's really important. And I do that with my boys. You're so handsome. You're so wonderful. Girl's going to get you. She's so lucky. I tell them this all of the time because children should not have to look outside to identify who they are or to know how great they are. Because chances are, those who are on the outside don't know how great you are. So with that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for this.
No, but don't go too far.
Thank you for whoever brought the tea.
Thank you very much. A token of our appreciation.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Can we have another applause, please, for our Najah? Thank you so much.